guys, today it is time for my... what month is it? Hey guys, today it is time for my April wrap-up. So I had the weirdest reading month and month in general. I was like sick quite a lot in this month, and then also I had the first week I didn't really read anything, and then we had Tometopple where I read quite a lot, and then the last few days I didn't really read much as well, and I DNFed 4 books, which we're gonna try and talk about today as well. It was a weird month. Let's just get into it. The first book I finished this month was Queens of Geek by Jen Wilde. I pre-ordered this book, but it took her a long time to arrive at my place. And when it finally arrived, I finished it in basically one sitting. I can binge read books quite well, but I rarely ever read books in one sitting. I mean, this is a 260-page book, so it's not that hard, but still, it means something. I really, really love this book. This is another great book about celebrating fandom culture. This whole book takes place at a convention, and it's just really, really lovely. It is told in a dual perspective, and one of the main characters is a bisexual Chinese-American girl, and she's also an actress and a YouTuber, and I mean, I'm not Chinese American, but I could relate to her so much, and I was just like, oh my god, I love this character. And there's also a female romance in it. The other main character was really interesting for me to read about because it's something I don't really have any knowledge of. She is a fat autistic girl with anxiety, and some of the anxiety things I could relate to, but I don't have an anxiety disorder, so it was really interesting to read from her perspective and just read from a point of view of someone who has anxiety and is autistic at a convention. I just really, really loved everything about it. I loved the setting, I loved the characters, and the romances were really great. Like, both of these main characters have a romance going on in this, and I just really, really enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars, so it wasn't quite up there, but I did give it a full 5 stars on Goodreads because I feel like there wasn't any flaw to it. It just wasn't quite up there for me, but I loved it. Then the Tometopple started, and the first book I read was Winter Song by S.J. Jones, and I absolutely hated this book. I hated it with every fiber of my body. Oh my god. I actually buddy read this with B from Heart Full of Books, so this was basically the only reason why I just pushed through, because it was a horrible book and I absolutely hated it. The thing is that it was not only like boring and just not good, it was very, very, very problematic. And I wrote a really long and detailed Goodreads review that I'm gonna leave in the description down below because I cannot possibly mention all of the things that I didn't enjoy and that I found problematic about this book, because that's just too much. One of the things were that it had really weird views on like losing your virginity and how to become a woman. It also had some weird things about consent. I cannot even mention all of the things anymore because I wrote my review because I just wanted to get all of these things out of my brain and forget about this book because I really didn't enjoy it. And it's actually like I have this box next to me, which this book was already in. For the next time I will just get rid of some more books because I hated this book that much that I immediately put it into a box so I don't have to see it anymore. And this is also full of the other books that I DNF'd this month, and I just got it out just for you to show you all of the books. Wasn't a fan of Winter Song at all. Wouldn't really recommend it because it is problematic. Like, if I just didn't like it, I wouldn't be like, oh, like nobody should read this book, blah blah blah. But because it was so problematic, I'm just like, just stay away from it. I gave Winter Song very obvious 1 out of 5 stars. So this is where I started DNFing a bunch of books, but I have decided to just mention all of the books that I DNF'd at the end of this video. So let's get into the next book that I finished, and that was Legend by Mary Lou. Finally, I read Legend. Like, oh my god. I have to say, while this is an enjoyable read, I just didn't think it was very special. I just didn't really have any attachments to the characters. I found the world building fine, but just not enough, and I just kind of expected more dystopian world building, but it just was very science fiction, and there wasn't enough things to grab my attention, and these things might happen in the sequels, but I just wasn't interested enough to continue with the series. And you know, I am a binge reader when it comes to series, so that I have not at least ordered the sequels in this series says a lot about this. And like, you can probably have really great arguments about how the series gets better with the sequels. I will probably not pick up the sequels because I'm already starting to forget about this and the characters and the world and everything, so really there's no point. And also, I know what happens at the end of Champion. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I think it's just one of these cases where it probably really would have been better if I read it like 4 years ago. but I didn't, so whatever. But then I read the whole Mara Dyer trilogy by Michelle Hodkin, The Unbecoming of Mara Dyer, The Evolution of Mara Dyer, which I read on Kindle and don't have a physical copy of yet, and the third book, The Retribution of Mara Dyer. And I really like this trilogy. Even the last book, which I know many people have lots of problems with, but I ended up really enjoying this trilogy. I think I'm just lucky that I got to binge this whole trilogy. I think I can really see why people maybe felt disappointed about this final book because they waited a year for this one. But I really got to connect all of these books, and I think that's definitely for this series the best way you could read them. I actually read both the first and the third book in one day. They have around like 450 pages. I just really flew through these books. It's just so intriguing. I think you can really tell that Michelle Hodkin just put a lot of thought into these books, and I just I don't know how to explain these books and how much I like them. They went into a direction that I wasn't really expecting, but I loved them all the more for that. There were some things that were predictable and then other things that I did not see coming at all. It had some really great characters. I do want to mention that the main relationship in this one is problematic. So this is actually, for me, definitely a guilty pleasure read. And if you know me, I don't really use the word guilty pleasure read because I find that kind of stupid. But in this case, it is a guilty pleasure read because it definitely had something problematic in it and I still enjoyed it. But I just want to put it out there. There's just some problematic dynamics in it that some people will probably not really feel comfortable with reading. But really, as much as I feel like people hype the romance in this one all the time, it is a big aspect of the first book, but there's so much more going on, and it's an intense read, and I cannot wait to reread this trilogy. I think there's so much more to discover about this trilogy, these characters, this world, and I just really liked it, and I cannot wait to read the fucking Becoming of Noah Shaw, which oh my god, I finished this and I was like, okay, cool, this was great. But knowing that there's gonna be more to this made it all even better. I gave all 3 books 4 stars, and I would have to say I probably all liked them equally. I could not really mention one of them as my favorite. And the final book that I read this month was The Wishing Heart by J.C. Welker. I received this book through NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. That review is probably gonna go up on Friday, I hope. But yeah, I'm gonna link it in the description and in the info card as soon as that is up, so you can check that one out. I have to say that in general, I enjoyed it, but there were just many things that I just didn't like about it. Especially the last 25% of the book were really disappointing because it went into a direction that was just very predictable and very cliche. The thing is, I think normally I would have been like, ugh, whatever, fine. But this book was a solid 4-star read for me at this point, and then it all went so predictable and cliche that I was just so upset and I was just so annoyed. My battery just died. Anyway, it was on a really good way and it could have been so much more, and that was what made me so upset. I said this in my review as well, but the first thing I could think of was this moment from Tyra Banks where she's like, I was rooting for you. We were all rooting for you. This is exactly how I felt about this book. I still want to say it is definitely a very enjoyable read, and it is a urban fantasy that has a female-female romance. So I do kind of want to say that because I feel like, many people out there are searching for more fantasy books with a female-female romance, and so I just want to say that I wouldn't not recommend it. I just had some issues with it, and I just felt like it was a little bit of a wasted potential, but I still want to recommend it, and I think the romance in it is actually absolutely beautiful, just as the writing. I think these 2 points were really something that made the whole book for me, and I enjoyed it for a lot of the book, but then some parts just weren't that great, and yeah, whatever. It's an enjoyable story, but just felt very conflicted at the end of it because I was like, oh my god, it could have been so much more. In the end, I decided to give The Wishing Heart my very neutral rating of 2.5 out of 5 stars, although I did give it 3 stars on Goodreads because I felt like this 2.5 star rating is a lot because the end was the part that I didn't like. You know how when you finish a book and it wasn't that good, you're just like, yeah, that's how I felt. Now let's get into the books that I DNF'd this month. I'm just gonna try and go over this quickly. I DNF'd Under the Never Sky by Veronica Rossi, 134 pages into it because I just wasn't feeling it. I didn't really like the world building, I didn't really like the characters, I really didn't like the writing. I wish this would have been first person. I think it really would have benefited from that, but it wasn't, and I was just not feeling it. This is one of the books that I'm actually not getting rid of just yet. I feel like maybe potentially I want to get into this again at some point. Honestly, I mean, it's been like 2 weeks now since I DNF'd it, and I'm just realizing I don't care. So probably not, but it's gonna stay on my shelf for a little while until I'm getting rid of it. And then I DNF'd The Program by Susan Young at 178 pages, and I just really wasn't a fan of this at all. I just think it was really like slow paced, even though it is a YA dystopian, and I kind of always expect them to be fast paced. And the concept of this is just very problematic in general, because it is about suicide and depression being an epidemic, and it just didn't really work for me. And I thought maybe it would redeem itself in the second book, but it doesn't, and I'm not having that. I'm not having that at all. I also DNF'd Dancing Jacks at around 40 pages, and I just wasn't feeling it. I feel like the beginning of this was supposed to be really creepy, but it wasn't. And if you watch my tometopple vlogs, I said a thing, and if you don't like the thing that I'm gonna say now, then I don't really care, but like, you can really tell this was written by a man. Like, already in the first 40 pages, it was like weird, and like the way the women were described in this one was weird, and I wasn't feeling it at all. I didn't like it at all, and I just didn't care. It's been on my TBR for like 4 years, and I was like, if this doesn't grab me by 50 pages, I'm done with it. And I was like already done with it after 40 pages, because I was just like, no. And finally, if you haven't watched my tometopple vlogs, then this is gonna be an interesting thing, and I don't want to get too much into details, but after all of these years, I have decided to DNF The Fiery Cross by Diana Gabaldon. I couldn't even get into this physical copy, and then I decided to listen to the audiobook, and I listened to an incredibly shortened version of the audiobook. I got 25% into the audiobook, an audiobook that is shortened a lot, so that you would think it only has the most important parts in it, but it was still only about like breastfeeding and just stupid, uninteresting stuff. I wasn't a fan. Diana Gabaldon is a problematic author, so I'm not sad about it. I'm just done. I love the first 3 books. I like the 4th book, but I'm done. Thank you, goodbye. I'm not having it. Goodbye. It's just not, no. So these were all of the books that I read and DNF'd in April. As I said, I had the weirdest month just in general, but I really reduced my TBR by lots of books this month, even if some of them were DNFs, but I just don't have all of these like extremely old books on my TBR anymore now that have been hyped on BookTube like years and years ago. Like, I'm getting there, so I can finally just say I read them. Well, I tried reading them. Anyway, let me know what some of your favorite books in April were, and if you DNF'd any, and thank you so much for watching, and I guess I'll see you soon. Bye!